What's up guys, I'm Taylor with TK Disc Golf, and once again the PDGA has announced some new discs that are approved towards the end of January 2023, and it didn't take long for the fan community to notice that Axiom Discs is getting a disc called Tempo. We don't really know what it is. It appears to be a putter, but we're going to hop on the speculation train to see what we can uncover and maybe potentially find out what this thing flies like. Let's start it. The first clues we can look at is actually the MVP to Axiom relationship. So typically MVP will actually get a mold first, and then Axiom will follow it up with like a slightly more beat in or less stable version of the MVP mold. We can see this with the reactor versus the hex, whereas like the reactor is like a slightly overstable mid-range to stable mid-range. Hex is just a very neutral, mash it flat, super straight. We got the servo to the Crave, the Tesla to the Wrath, or the Octane to the Mayhem if you go all the way up to the distance drivers. It's a common trend across MVP versus Axiom. So now that we know that relationship from MVP versus Axiom, we can actually hop onto the PDGA's website to try to compare the tempo's dimensions that they've measured to other existing MVP molds. After doing some comparison and back and forth, I was able to determine that the tempo is almost identical measurements to the entropy. If you don't know what the entropy is, that is an overstable, very fast putt and approach disc. It's got the flight numbers 4 speed, 3 glide, 0 turn, and 3 fade, making it a very dependable putter off the tee for forehands, backhand shots, even into the wind. Very useful disc. However, if Axiom is going to end up being the slightly more understable version, it would make sense that they would need that spot filled because there's currently nothing there. Looking at the dimensions though, max weight 176 for both, diameter 21.2 for both, height, the entropy is a little bit taller at 2 centimeters and the tempo is a 1.6 centimeters. Rim depth identical for both, inside rim almost identical for both, and then the rim thickness, which is basically how they determine speed, is identical for both. So very safe to say that tempo is going to be the same speed class as entropy and a very similar counterpart to it. One of the easiest ways to tell how a disc is going to fly is actually by the side profile, and thankfully MVP, Axiom, and Streamline provide very nice stock images when they request a disc to be approved from the PDGA, and it didn't take long for once the Tempo's stock image was kind of floating around the internet to people to make the assumption that this disc looks a lot like a zone. And when you compare the side profiles of the MVP entropy, the Axiom tempo, and the zone, you can really tell the tempo is very similar. The entropy's got a lot like more rounded top to it, a lot deeper look, versus the tempo and the zone very flat. And once you actually overlay the tempo's side profile with the zones, they're almost identical. The tempo looks like a smidge flatter, but man, it's going to be really cool to see once the tempo is released. Now that we've done all this eyeball science, I'm really thinking that the tempo is going to have the same flight numbers as the entropy. Now I know typically MVP and Axiom, they'll have like slightly less stable versions of each other, but I think this one's going to come down to just the feel in hand, having a slightly shallower version of the entropy, flatter top. It'll be a lot more comfortable for forehand players to throw this approach shot putter disc, and obviously it's a very similar profile to that zone. So flight numbers, I'm really thinking it's going to just stay at 4 speed, 3 glide, 0 turn, 3 fade. Maybe it drops to 2.5 fade to make it like a slightly less stable version of an entropy, but really it just looks like to me it's still going to be very overstable, and it's just going to change how it feels in your hand. If you're wondering when the tempo is going to release, your guess is really as good as mine. MVP and Axiom, they like to get their discs approved ahead of time just to lock in the name, and I did one of these videos about 6 months ago, and actually MVP, Axiom, and Streamline, between those three, have about a half dozen discs that are still in limbo that have their PDGA approvals but have not been released yet. So hopefully tempo gets the bump up, because I think this is a super hype released that a lot of people are really looking forward to and have been begging for years. If you want to see more of these like speculation type videos, drop a comment down below. Do you think I was pretty on par, or am I pretty off on my guess on how it's going to fly? Let us know down below, and again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of our future videos. Thanks for watching.